True North. If you've read Steering by Starlight by Martha Beck, you'll understand what that means as she talks about following your own North Star. And as I've been considering that, and this, of course, True North ties in with a number of the readings that I've been doing in terms of empowering yourself, getting your thoughts on track, which is what shadow work is about. It's not about dark work, it's about accepting all of ourselves, the good, the bad, the ugly, and bringing it all together and knowing where we need to tweak and fine-tune things. And that's why this week I am making my wrap-up banned book videos. Here's part of the reason why. Books waiting to be read. As I've gone over in my live stream, cube number 1, cube number 2, and cube number 3. Books in this basket that are waiting. I have, of course, my Book Trek basket and Rocket Summer. I have books here that are waiting. These are all the books that are waiting to be summarized, and that's a whole basket. So as you can see, I have plenty on the go, and as much as I've enjoyed revisiting a number of authors for the banned book project, oh yes, as I'm doing this, I have some rereads as well as new reads in this cube, and the same in this cube. There's books back there. I have little Tiki traveling through going, Mom, we need to have some priorities set. Kitty time. And I also have books on my cart. You're such a goofball. As much as I've enjoyed revisiting some authors, I definitely need to get back to what I was focused on before, which is talking about parables, self-empowerment, the love of reading. There are a number of topics waiting in the Hoax or Holy Grail series that each take about a month by the time I've tracked all the information down, checked certain things out. So I really need to get back to what the focus of my channel was, getting caught up on various readings that I had planned, and really diving into the research as well. And that doesn't include the craft projects I have outstanding, the personal work that I have that I need to get to, all the yard work that I've been doing if you've been watching some of my videos, as well as just a number of other things. Banned books. What did I learn? Quite a bit, actually, and I'm definitely glad that I've looked into this. If you haven't looked into this yet, or you just want to find out what other booktubers have been saying about the different books and the project, be sure to go to hashtag 24 lowercase bb to find out more information. This particular hashtag was started by MJ from Reading This Life. I've mentioned her before in my videos regarding this, and also go check out her channel. And if you go to the hashtag, you can find her. So the first thing that I really figured out about this is the term actually should be challenged books, not banned books, because the vast majority of these books, thankfully, are available both through school libraries still, public libraries, as well as, of course, through the publishers and bookstores and so many other locations. So the upside to this is that the majority of these challenges have not been accepted. Sadly, in some areas, yes, they have. So there are some schools and public libraries where these books aren't available to that part of the population. In fact, out of the 12 books that I read, I borrowed 8 from my public library. I owned a couple of the others, although there are some books I can't get through my library. A number of the titles that I wanted for this project are still available. The other thing that I learned is that rarely do these people making the complaints read the books they're complaining about. And I find that very frustrating, and that's part of why I've been rethinking my involvement in this. These individuals haven't taken the gift of their time to read the material. All they're doing is parroting and yada-yadaing what their puppet masters tell them. And I find that beyond irritating. If you're going to make a complaint about something, and I've said this in one of my other videos, personally, if I had to deal with some of this, I would be asking people, name the page, give me the full context. Don't just say, oh, it has violence. Oh, it has this. Oh, it offends me because of that. Give me the specifics. What page? What was actually happening in that book that offended you? Oh, you haven't read it? Bye-bye. Because if you haven't read it, then you don't understand what that book is about. You're not even considering that maybe what you're saying is incorrect because you haven't thought about it yourself. The more I realized that, the more irritated I became, especially because, as I pointed out earlier in this video, I have a ton of other reading that involves research, self-development, so many other things. And the other thing, sadly, that occurred to me is even sharing about these books, the majority of us who are watching those videos are watching because we believe in the concept of freedom to read and not challenging books. So I wish that part of this project was turning some people around and getting them to, use that thing between the ears and maybe process that they shouldn't just be parroting what they're told to parrot. But I'm not sure that's what's happening based on some things I've heard from other people. So for myself, this continues to be, and I'm sure you can tell by my voice, it continues to be something that I strongly believe in terms of freedom to read and access to material. It's why for 23 years of my career in schools, the biggest part of what I was doing was teaching students to read, to think for themselves, to not just accept what they were told blindly. I wanted them to think and excel and develop important skills so that as they became adults out in the community, they would take those skills and abilities with them and not just become these little puppets who go on about whatever their string masters are telling them to go on about. So it's an issue I'll continue to look into, but closer to home. In February, I will definitely be having a video, as here in Canada, that's when we have Freedom to Read Week. I'll be chatting with friends of mine who continue to work in schools about why isn't this a bigger issue in schools here in Ontario. Why didn't we ever have assemblies about this? We certainly had assemblies about everything else. I'm pretty sure freedom to read and access to those materials should be a top priority for an education system. The other thing that I realized as I was starting to look at what were the complaints, where were the complaints coming from, etc., is that this relates specifically to materials available in school and public libraries. It doesn't necessarily relate to issues that happen at publishing houses, and I am aware of some of those because of different material that I read. There are billions of books out there, and I'm sure if these people got their hands on some of them, well, not that they'd read them, but they'd still come up with a reason to complain. The other thing that occurred to me as I was doing it, of course, is whether they're talking about violence or whatever other issues, because it's pretty much the same 4 or 5 for all the books I came across. So that pretty much sums up my whole feelings about the banned book issue. Not the project, but the issue overall of banned books. I think people need to be aware. I think parents who have children in school should certainly be mindful in terms of, are you encouraging your children to think for themselves? Are you wanting them to have access to material to expand their minds and not just have one opinion, but to understand again, and I keep going back to this. Do you want them to understand that as humans, we are all one collective group? And in order to appreciate and understand that, it's important to read material by a variety of authors, of situations, of time periods, of mindsets. Because if you forget where you came from, whether that's your own family history or whether that's your country's history, if those mistakes are forgotten, then you're bound to repeat them. And as I say, I'm not ignoring this issue of banned books. I'm just going to be approaching it from a different standpoint. I'll be doing 2 more videos about this. First, I'll be covering book 6 to 1 that I'd read. So I'll be starting with 1984. I've already made a video about that. Marked, that's from the House of Night series. Go Ask Alice, Looking for Alaska, Lord of the Flies, and of Mice and Men. The next video that I'll make will be covering the books 7 to 12 that I read. The Giver, The Handmaid's Tale, which I did as a buddy reads with Revenant Reads, Finn, and Dave at Book Blather. The Outsider, The Golden Compass, The Amber Spyglass, and MockingJay. That's the 3rd book in the Hunger Games series. 3 other books that I will be mentioning, and these aren't on the banned book list, but they certainly contribute to some of what I started thinking about, and I think they are important reads. How Woke One, this is by Joanna Williams. If you watched my part 2, you know this is the author who was banned from speaking at my public library in March 2023, a month after Freedom to Read Week, which was rather ironic and why I followed up this author. And no, it is not a book I could borrow from my library either. They didn't have a copy of her. Another book that I highly recommend, and this was one of my purchases recently at my thrift store, Harry Potter, Narnia, and The Lord of the Rings, What You Need to Know About Fantasy Books and Movies. This is by Richard Abanes. I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by this book. It does present a balanced viewpoint of the series. He stresses the importance of, before you make a complaint, actually read the material, do some research, get to know the authors that you're making claims against, because 2 of them actually are Christian, and they were not anti-Christian in their works, but you'd actually need to read and understand that. So I very much enjoyed this particular author's viewpoint, and he did provide balanced viewpoints from both sides, and I very much appreciate, no, he is not into banning books or burning books. Another book that I found during one of my thrift store adventures, and this was a new to me author, but I very much enjoyed reading this, Why People Believe Weird Things. This is by Michael Shermer. It's about pseudoscience, superstition, and other confusions of our time. Very interesting read. A part of the book talks about Holocaust deniers. Have to admit that years ago, when a friend of mine told me that there were people who would think that the Holocaust was a hoax, that it never happened, my response to him was, that can't be right. The Holocaust, it's in the history books. There are survivors. People know this happened. And yet, according to this book, sure enough, my friend was right. That makes me very sad, quite frankly, but this book was an interesting read. I highly recommend. I'm very glad that I did get involved in the banned book project, so thank you, MJ, for starting it. There were a lot of things to learn in terms of my own country, in terms of the United States and the United Kingdom, which are the three countries that I looked at specifically in terms of this issue. I'll be continuing with it, as I say, in a different way and not so much in my videos. If you have found this video to be of benefit or interest, be sure to hit that like button, as that definitely helps me out, along with leaving a comment. That tells the YouTube algorithm that people are watching and interested in the content that I produce. If you're not subscribed yet and you enjoy content of a bookish nature, nature videos, or just silly cat videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you know when I upload content that may be of interest to you. And until next time, take good care.